Hello everyone and welcome back to the video. Listen, you guys are sucking me in to some high level Age of Empires 2 analysis, and this is my true passion when it comes to Age of Empires. And so let's dive deep. Let's get in there and let's answer some questions. So today I'm going to be talking about a topic brought up from Lol Electro in one of my videos, and he basically was asking, he put a comment, it's going to be on screen if you want to pause and read it. He's basically telling me how at 1100 ELO, 1200 ELO, 1000 ELO, extended feudal play never happens. It's just a little bit of army, a few scouts, maybe archers, wall up, get the castle age 40 pop, and even if he does make like skirms to defend or whatnot, it still doesn't lead to an extended feudal age. So he's basically asking, when do we go for extended feudal age? Do you force it, or what's the criteria for this to actually work? Again, this is some high level AoE2 discussion, but I am here for it and I'll give you guys the answers that you're looking for, and I hope you guys will enjoy this kind of style. It is opening a little bit of a wormhole because one thing will lead to more questions, but if you guys have more questions about this topic, leave them in the comments below, and if this is interesting for you, I'll continue going down more and more in depth into, some Age of Empires discussion. So strategically, why is extended feudal never seen at intermediate elo, 1000 elo, less than 1000 elo? Why is extended feudal never being played, even though we see it semi-frequently in high level? I would say in high level, 1 out of 5 games on Arabia would probably feature some sort of extended feudal age, and then in some other maps you'd see a lot of maybe even all-in feudal ages taking place, the ones that are more aggressive. So there's a few criteria as to why extended feudal age does not work in lower elo, and I'm going to start by talking about that. But first you have to understand the goal of extended feudal age. So the goal with extended feudal age is to change the dynamic of the game. If you just play a standard feudal age, there is no advantage being taken place at either side. If you just go few scouts, wall up, that is what we call a neutral game state. There's no advantage to be had, and oftentimes this is okay. If we're talking about high level games, this is completely fine to have a neutral game, because you want to scale to late game, you want to play in a different timing, play to castle age. But sometimes one guy's civ is a really good late game civ and the other guy has a very strong early game civ, and in this scenario a neutral game state does not favor the guy with a stronger early game civ. Take for example Magyar's a strong early game civ up against something like Bohemians, which is a really strong late game civ. Now if they just play neutral game state up until Imperial Age, the Bohemian player is more than happy to pop up with Halb Hufnitz, maybe hand cannoneer, and steamroll the Magyar player. Even though the Magyar player is a decent late game, he just has no chance against the death ball. So in this scenario, the Magyar player would have to force something in the early game to change the dynamic of the game and not allow the neutral game state that favors the scaling civ over the Magyar civ. In this case, you can take a look at a number of factors. Sometimes one civilization has a very strong economy, and in that case, letting the neutral game state favor the civ with a strong economy is not the way to go. So in this scenario, where one guy, usually the guy with the aggressive civ or like the early game civ, has to make something happen, and this is where he would look for an extended feudal age. And the way this is done is by adding extra army or by putting extra pressure to prevent the opponent from walling and force the opponent to react to him in feudal age. You do not want the game to get a castle age right away, and if your opponent does not want to fight you in feudal age, just tries to wall up no matter what, that's when the guy who wants to force extended feudal age doubles down. He goes forward with towers, he switches into a secondary unit to continue putting pressure, and he really continues to force the guy who wants to get the castle age and keep it neutral. He forces him to react and he forces him to change his game plan. As you can see in higher level play, especially in the pro play, every player knows his win condition, and if there's ever a window where he can force something or a movement that benefits him over the opponent player civ situation, he will take it. And this is why extended feudal age is seen, because oftentimes if it's different civs on each side, one civilization will have an advantage. Maybe it's a small one, maybe it's a big one. In feudal age, one civ would be better, and therefore he would want to push that advantage to try to get even more advantage. If he doesn't push that advantage, as I mentioned earlier, it keeps in a neutral state, and potentially the other civ will scale better or will have another timing window to take advantage later on in the game, and that puts your opponent ahead. So why is this concept completely lost on lower level players or beginner players? Let's talk about a few reasons why extended feudal age is just never really seen in low level. And when it is seen, it's not seen with purpose. It's kind of just seen as like a lot of randomness happening. I've seen extended feudal age where it's just like random stuff happening without purpose. It's not really the same thing. Okay, so the number one reason why it doesn't work in low elo is because people are way too slow to attack. Now, keeping the guy open is the number one most important thing to do if you want to extend feudal age, because walls, and especially walls with like a market behind or with archers behind, you can't really break that in feudal age. The only way to do that is to send forward towers. We'll talk about that later though. So keeping the guy open is super crucial crucial. That's actually step 1 to making the extended feudal happen. And in lower levels, you guys are a bit too slow to attack. You'll see that the guy makes a few scouts, then he waits a minute while he makes a few farms, while he's like walling up, and then he goes to attack a minute later. And by the time the scouts reach, sometimes the other guy's fully walled. Even in the scenarios where the guy attacks fast, let's say he's going for a scout rush, he sends them in at the correct time. Sometimes he gets met with a few spearmen. The defending player makes a few spearmen, and then the scout player just stops there. He does not look to go for the next step, which is actually to follow up army to counter whatever your opponent's first move is. So if I go scouts, I run into spears, and I'm set on extending feudal age because I have an aggressive civ, my follow-up should be something like skirms or archers, and it should come forward right away, assuming I have the map control. This is especially a concept completely lost on lower level players because they don't see the follow-up as an aggressive move. Usually they see the follow-up as, oh, I have to counter what my opponent is doing, not, oh, I'm going to counter what my opponent's doing and kill him. See, they're missing the last step in game, by the way. They're missing the last step that the follow-up could be a counter unit to play aggressive. And this is what a lot of you guys have to understand, is that a follow-up army does not necessarily have to be only on defense. This is why scouts into skirms is a very strong composition in high elo, because the skirms are not just a defensive tool. The skirms will actually act as an offensive tool. So in high elo, you'd attack really fast with the scouts. The guy makes spears, maybe archers. Then the follow-up skirms will not be defensive. They'll actually come forward and keep the archer player open even more. And now you have scouts and skirms on the field, and now your opponent has to maybe invest into scouts himself. You see how by sending the follow-up army faster and forward, your opponent is now even more inclined to make more army and fight you in feudal age, which is the entire goal of extending the feudal age. So in my opinion, 90% of low level games or beginner level games ends right here as far as the aggression. No more aggression happens after step number 2, and we're at step number 2 of 5, by the way, of what you need to extend feudal. So step number 2, I think 90% of games, like, they just fail here. So what you would see in low level games is the guy goes scouts, the archer player goes spears and defense, and then the scout player just walls up, and that's the end of that. There's no more forcing feudal happens. It just goes to castle age. Now, I want to quickly point out that this is not bad. You don't have to always extend feudal age, and playing towards castle age is actually the advice I give everyone at lower levels. I always give you guys the advice to get the castle age first, so I would suggest that you don't extend feudal age, and the reason for that is because it's a lot harder to extend feudal age correctly than it is just to play for the faster castle age and win that way. But if you guys are curious about extended feudal age, this is what the next step is. So after you send the follow-up army, you counter the spears, your opponent will naturally have to react with something else. Now you have 2 units on the field, scout skirms or scout spear. You have 2 units on the field putting pressure, preventing enemy from walling. The next step is if they manage to wall or if they manage to play defensive, this is when you have to come with forward towers if you insist on extending the feudal age. It's incredibly important because if they get walls down, and again, the walls they get will not be the perfect walls because you prevented them from getting the perfect walls. So they're going to be walling. Maybe they wall out their gold, they wall out their wood line a little bit. There's going to be places where you can hit them with the tower. And when you come forward with towers, this is when your opponents cannot ignore you anymore. Ignoring the guy going forward towers and just trying to wait till castle age is where a lot of people lose the game if they're on defense. And this is why Tato, if you guys know his Feudal Boy account, he plays only feudal age. His opponent knows he's only going to go feudal age, and they still die to him because they cannot stop his forward towers. They still try to greet the castle age, and they get pressured, they get trapped, and their entire economy completely collapses to the aggression in feudal age. So this is where a pro player would come forward towers and punish the guy who's walling up and who's trying to turtle. He won't let him get the castle age with a safe economy. And again, this at lower levels, to do these 3 steps in a row, fast attack to prevent walls, then the follow-up to prevent walls even more and force a reaction, and then the towers to continue putting pressure. All of these 2 things is very hard to get the timing down perfectly. So that's step 3. Step 4 is, even if you do all this, right, you have to know what to do when the enemy hits castle age. Again, going back to the Tato Feudal Void games, even in those games where he's going forward and he's towering, he can't stop his opponent from clicking castle age. Oftentimes at this point, your opponent can use the market, he'll have some farm set up, he could get up to castle age. This is not like, you can't prevent him from going up to castle age unless you kill like a bunch of villagers or something. But in most cases, you cannot fully prevent him from getting to castle age. So at this point, you have to know what to do even when your opponent hits castle age, okay? And what you should do, this is what you're looking for, is number 1, to make sure he doesn't have gold access or he has an inefficient economy. This is done with towers, with your army. Step 2 is you want to make sure that he cannot get a lot of castle age army on the field, and if he does, you have the right counters. For example, if he gets knights out in the field, what you want is scouts with extra attack, so 4 charging, which can actually chase down the knights, or a group of archers that can kill the knights, or you want to have a lot of spears. And if he tries to counterattack you with the knights, you want to make sure that you wall your resources or wall your entire base. You don't want to die to the first few Castle Age units. For example, if he goes instead of Knight Siege, then you want Bloodline scouts with armor to dive and snipe the siege. So you have to be ready to play Feudal Age versus Castle Age for a few minutes. Now, the twist here is that you in Feudal Age have the pressure, you have the better economy, and you have your opponent kind of pinned in. So even though the guy's in Castle Age, he's actually in the disadvantage in most cases in the situation. But if you don't know what to do, if you start panicking to the first 2-3 knights that come out, which you will have in Knight Siege, whatever, if you start panicking to it and you make the wrong calls, then you will lose the game. This is why in step 4, it's very crucial you know how to play against an opponent who's in Castle Age. And I've done it many times. For those who watch me regularly, either on YouTube, gameplay channel, on Twitch, you have seen me do all in Feudal Ages where I'm in Feudal Age beating someone who's in Castle Age. And this is completely possible, and this is step 4 of the extended Feudal Age. Now, step 5 is kind of the backup plan. If after all this, your opponent hits Castle Age, you continue pinning him in, you don't 100% win the game. You have to know how to continue the game or how to recover if a few things go poorly. Let's say your opponent drops a castle, pushes you back. You have to know how to recover. And usually after an extended Feudal Age, you're going to get the Castle Age later, but you're going to have a lot of resources set up. The reason for this is you have 40 to 50 villagers set up, and you're going to have a lot of resources, as on the way to Castle Age, those guys have been always working fully efficiently all the way up until you hit Castle Age. So when you hit Castle Age, you don't have a small economy, you have a lot of resources and a decently sized economy. Now with those resources, you have a few ways to follow up that are important to know to make sure you're able to win the game and not throw the game. A couple options is to spam army in Castle Age to make sure you're continuing to pin your opponent, or you can finish him off. Or if he has a castle, what you can do is actually drop a castle yourself and fast imp. Because of that influx of resources from the extended Feudal Age, it could actually lead nicely into a fast imp. So if it's a strategic game where your opponent has a castle but no units, you can go castle on hill close by and then just treb him with the fast imp. It's a nice follow-up. Or you can try to catch up in the economy and go 4 TCs while putting on some pressure with more army, more siege, and just try to get up your economy and try to win the game by having the better position on the map while having a decent economy back home as well. All of those ways to finish the game are all valid depending on the situation, but what's important is that you need to know which one to go for at what time. If you don't do the right steps, you could give your opponent a window in which they can come back, and even if you did all the other 4 steps properly, sometimes there's still a window for your opponent to push you back, start counterattacking, and you actually could lose the game. So these 5 steps are very crucial to be done in order, and as you can see, each step requires a lot of knowledge, a lot of setup, and a lot of initiative to be taken. And this is just not something that can be done effectively at lower levels. So my advice for the lower level players, once again, is to not really care for extended Feudal Age. I hope this theory helps you understand why it could be good, but it also should show you why it's not that good or not that useful in lower level. At lower level, the best way to win a game is to simply get the Castle Age first. The reason for that is because Castle Age units just do so much better against Feudal Age units or a Feudal Age player at lower levels. So you get a few knights out. Remember at number 3, where the guy gets Castle Age and the Feudal player has those towers, those knights at lower elo will counterattack and kill everything. Those knights at lower elo will clean up all the Feudal Age army. The siege will clean up all the Feudal Age army, which is why faster Castle Age is the better win condition to aim for when you're a lower level player or when you're a beginner player. So my advice to you all is, do this information as you will, but continue on the plan to try to get the Castle Age faster and then win the game through better Castle Age units or by expanding your economy and spending your resources. That is always going to be the strongest strategies for lower level players and guys who want to improve at the game. But I hope that you've found this theory interesting, and if you guys have any other questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them via video format. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you guys thought about this video. If you guys did enjoy it, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you guys want more content from me, check out my Twitch channel for the live streams and my Patreon for exclusive content, build orders, and all other things to help you guys get better. Links to both in the description. Thanks for watching and have a nice day. Peace.